I have become aware that a person who is close to me, who I can't just cut off, is into basically the anti-SJW industry, or the self-proclaimed intellectual dark web. And it's interesting because I've been trying to figure out, so I'm entering this, YouTube and social media world to do online education. And, I don't really want to spend a whole lot of time doing what's already been done, what I feel has already been done sufficiently by people like Sean and ContraPoints and Peter Coffin and Three Arrows, Thought Slime, Non-Compete, and Cuck Philosophy and Philosophy Tube. And, there's so many other content creators who I'm just starting to get into. I just discovered Black Curriculum and Angie Speaks and all of these other awesome creators pretty recently. All of these different creators who've done so much to respond to the roving millennials and the Paul Joseph Watsons and Shapiros and just all of these other people. I've discovered you can't just give people links. For instance, just like the idea that racism is more complicated than your own personal feelings and intentions, that it goes beyond mere prejudice and discrimination and into the realms of the institutional and the systemic. That is not something that, if I say it, then it's instantly like, well, then what? Explain it to me. And I say, well, like a heritage of slavery and of, discriminatory housing practices that create ghettoization and, underfunded schools that are basically, internment camps training people for prisons or for dead-end jobs that are basically impossible to cover the basic costs of living. You find yourself giving like thoughtful, lengthy, detailed responses. What you get back is, take someone who is taking on 10% of the conversation because it's the points they feel like they can respond to, leaving the 90% of what you've said untouched. What they point out in the All Right Handbook series is that what happens is that emotionally and from outside, it might actually look like the other person is winning just because they're the ones who are waging the constant accusation, constant assault, and putting you on your defenses, making you do all of this work.
He says his short, quippy statement, and you give your detailed rebuttal. He then picks a single point from your response and attacks that as the new subject. Now, to an onlooker, the logical brain would register that he's leaving 90% of your argument on the table, and that by changing positions, he's conceding he lost the first round. But the lizard brain notices that he's always making the accusations, always in the dominant position, that he's always acting, and you're always reacting. Regardless of what is said, he displays all the outward signs of winning. So on a purely emotional level, he leaves the impression of being right. And I have never had an argument look like this that wasn't in public. This is a technique that means speaking not so much to the other person as to the people watching.
But ultimately pushing you to the point of frustration. And what is that frustration? Why do I personally lose patience when it comes to something like this? It's because I don't have the fucking time and energy and attention to continually give someone the feedback and the arguments and the attention that they want, that they feel entitled to, that has already been covered in the literature and now in the YouTubeosphere through LeftTube. Why do I have to do something that they've already done sufficiently, at least as far as I can tell? And if they haven't, the burden of proof for me has been met. The burden of proof for me has been met, but it hasn't been for like this family member. And it's like, okay, sometimes you just need to accept that a lost cause is a lost cause and move on. But what about when, by the way, that's a lesson alone that took me years to learn. And by the time that I realized that I need to move on, I also realized I hadn't grown that much myself because I'd been trying to maintain myself as intelligible or digestible to these other people who ultimately, like, they may never change. They don't have to change. They're their own people. They're free to think what they want to think, believe what they want to believe. And if they want to just say, oh, I'm not racist, and stick their heels into the ground, they have the right to do that. And I shouldn't really be losing sleep over this. It's not like it's their soul that's on the line and this is religion or something, right? But at the same time, I feel like I have this privilege now because I have spent so much time at the university and my work has, been related to further educating myself and learning from other people and engaging in controversial and sticky issues, conversations that most people who don't go to college don't have access to. And so with that, it's like, shouldn't I be utilizing my privilege to respond in the best ways necessary? And then I feel like pulled into this tension of, like, some of my patrons think that I should be trying to radicalize people so that they could even get to a point where they would care about LeftTube. Whereas, I mean, other people that are patrons, literally, they're already sold on most of that stuff anyway, and they're looking to further their own education outside of the university. They want to be tackling these great thinkers, these difficult texts. And honestly, like, I feel called towards a constant life of, like, learning things that are beyond the 101 level. I want to be learning this. I want to be reading, Levinas. I want to be working up to the point where I feel like I could actually tackle a text like Otherwise Than Being. And, without thinkers like that, without texts like that, like, Butler wouldn't be where she's at, and she is at the cutting edge right now, or Spivak, for that matter, is so enmeshed, post-colonial studies is so enmeshed in the post-structural discourses, and it's like, where do you even start with that, right? And it's like, I'm trying to engage all these different texts. I'm trying to find ways of bringing them to more people. And I feel, what I really think I'm trying to get at with this video is that I just feel torn between speaking to people who are completely unconvinced that there's any problems in the world, that, ecologically, economically, and socially, the biggest problems really boil down to the ones that the conservative, framework keeps setting as, well, these are the real issues. It all comes down to guns and abortion and taxation. And it's like, not capitalism, not empire, not racism, not sexism, not transphobia. Those things aren't real. Those things aren't actual problems because, and then, they cede some ground, but then they come right back at you as though they never ceded that ground in the first place.
He says something short, quippy, and wrong. You give a detailed correction. He says something else short, quippy, wrong, and only tangentially related to his last point, and the cycle repeats itself. This goes on and on.
Once you know what that is, and once you've seen it, once you can kind of step back and see it for what it is, it's like, okay, well, then what do you do with people who think that they're right and think that they are entitled to your response, and who, if you act impatient or if you act flippant or if you just write them off as a lost cause, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt deeply because they're your family. I mean, they're your little sister, they're your little brother, they're your cousin, they're your niece, they're your nephew, right? At the end of that video, he says he doesn't really know what to suggest. He doesn't really know what to do. That at the end of the day, if someone's coming into a conversation in bad faith, you don't have to engage.
In this political climate, these debates have real impact on real people's lives. They are not, in fact, a game of football. So if someone tries to force you to play defense, you don't have to play.
But my problem is knowing when I really don't have to engage. Where's that line when the person is, like, related? And I know there's, like, this part of me, and I've said this even to other people, like, well, family's family. Like, you owe them being, respectful and, coming to some family occasions and, hanging out and not getting in a fight and not writing them off for being bigoted, but you don't owe them anything else. And at the end of the day, family members are not the ones who are going to take you seriously. You need to look out for yourself. You need to look out for your own health before getting caught up in that kind of it's a sort of a black hole for emotion and time and energy and attention. Like, you need to look out for yourself, sure. And, your own health comes first, and you can't do the work for other people. I've heard it all already, but what is the solution though I guess I'm not looking for like the solution. There's not like the solution. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for like, what are practices, techniques, approaches for dealing with this kind of a thing? How do you cultivate love for people who may never change?